So hello and welcome to the latest edition of Business Insights, brought to you by Business South. My name is Kate Pearce, and I've been tasked with speaking to leaders from across the Central South as part of this series. Today I'm joined by Sandy Hopkins, and she's the Chief Executive at Southampton City Council. And I'm guessing, Sandy, that through the pandemic, times that you must have been pretty busy, not only running, a massive organisation, but the city was looking to you for leadership.
Well, yeah, I'm part of a system in the city, and obviously fantastic system. We've got some amazing businesses across the city that got very heavily involved working with us as an organisation. I mean, we are a business ourselves, as you said. We're £1 billion business. We're more like a conglomerate, I guess, at Southampton City Council. We've got 700 different services that we provide. So perhaps speaking as a business, we're providing those 700 services. We've got about 20% of the homes in the city that we're landlord to. So ratcheting that up and supporting colleagues to carry on providing services on the front line to all our tenants. And we've got carpenters, plumbers, electricians who help service those homes and those people that live in those homes. So that all carried on. And on top of that, we had about 11,000 people who were shielding in the city. So we were quickly ratcheting up the provisions and food and medicine and so on to help those 11,000 shielding. Fantastic voluntary network in the city, over 800 organisations and charities that have done some amazing work over the last 18 months. So as a system, really pleased to see all the different leaders really pulling together and helping one another, the universities, health system, the volunteering organisations that I said, and businesses, big businesses in the city and small businesses in the city. So I think we've been really lucky. It's been a relentless task. And clearly what we've seen is some pretty sad things as well, demand going up in certain areas and issues, people in lockdown does create some people issues, some society issues that we pick up on, and of course well-being for our own 3,500 staff, but also trying to think about mental health and well-being across the city. And again, it's something that I've got very involved in, working with other business leaders who have been trying to help their own employees across the city. So yeah, it's been relentless, but it's been really encouraging to see how people can pull together in tough times, and leaders can really become system leaders rather than just working in their silos. So I feel very encouraged by the experience, but it's been a tough experience as well. Yeah, feeling quite responsible for 260,000 residents and 8,000 businesses.
Yes, that's the thing, isn't it? And it's I guess as well, it's sort of drawing on experiences that you've had in the past, yet in such an extraordinary time, isn't it? I mean, were there particular things that you did draw on during that time?
Well, I think something that you do as a chief executive of a local authority is have fairly regular emergencies. And you've got a system in place for those emergencies. And, I think we know there are national emergencies that you can fall back on and understand that you have to prepare for. So things like the Manchester bombing, things like Grenfell, these are all really sad occasions nationally that actually, as a chief executive of any local authority, you are aware of, and you learn the lessons from those, and you work with the networks of chief executives in other local authorities, including those that were on duty in the times when those big national emergencies happened, including the July bombings in London, way back when. And Southampton itself has had some emergencies, including fires and floods and so on. So definitely fell back on that, and immediately we have a system in place in the council, a silver command and a gold command, and bronze for any of these perhaps weekend emergencies or overnight emergencies that do happen on a fairly regular basis through a normal business year. So we did fall back on what we'd got in place for that. but nothing can prepare you for a pandemic. And we've got those books on the shelf that are your emergency books, or your nowadays it's on SharePoint, your emergency system. And of course, pandemic is there in the list. And you do rehearse for these things, but even those rehearsals, those training sessions that you might do in the system with police and fire, don't prepare you totally. And I think what you also find is that there's a whole system of businesses out there that are looking to you for support and help. And government were really good ratcheting up the grant system, but everything that requires in terms of processing it and trying to make sure that you're following everything that the government needs in terms of returns and forms and stuff like that, getting all of that up to scratch. But I'm really proud of that. Again, I think the system that we had to be able to pay businesses the grants and get those out, I think we had something like 95% of all of that going out quite quickly within a matter of weeks. So, but yeah, how do you prepare beyond what I've just said? I don't know. I mean, I think communication is key, and keeping those networks open. And of course, this time the IT was absolutely essential, getting that up and running quickly so that those that could work from home in my organisation were able to work from home, to keep those that couldn't safe. About 2/3 of our business had to carry on doing their jobs in their normal place of work, and that meant that 1/3 of people we were able to kind of move out and work from home, which gave the kind of social distancing space that you need to give your social workers and your health professionals, and your care professionals, your housing professionals.
And also, as well, I suppose some of your teams would have been moved around, wouldn't they, to the sort of hotspots and the if their particular area of expertise was not operational at that time. You were moving people around, weren't you, into different roles?
Yes. In fact, I mean, one of the things we didn't do was furlough anyone. I mean, there were obviously so almost too many things that needed people to be redeployed into other roles. And one of the biggest ones and the quickest ones was the 11,000 people shielding, and trying to get people out and about and really dealing with that, working with supermarkets to get the food available. I think the other area was PPE. You might remember there was a big shortage of PPE nationally. I remember I was making even personal contacts with businesses outside of the city, from kind of other roles, because even within the city we were struggling with our networks to actually get the kind of PPE supplies. Businesses were fantastic, and some of my own personal business networks came up with the goods when we needed it, and we were able to provide our private sector care homes in the city, not just our own in our own business that belong to us, but also private sector care homes that were really struggling to get PPE. So yeah, certainly. I mean, our head of commercial development suddenly became a PPE specialist, and was dealing with all of that procurement side of things as well. So yeah, you're right. And I think a lot of people really enjoyed that experience of moving out of their normal day jobs and actually doing something slightly different. So some of the people who are on our support services behind a computer all day were suddenly out there rolling their sleeves up and dealing on a day-to-day basis, face to face with vulnerable people in the city that needed help.
And your links with business, I mean, it sounded like they were strong anyway, prior to the situation unfolding. But clearly that has been something that has grown as well over the time. Has that been I don't know if there could be positives coming out of this. Has that been one of the main ones?
Yeah, I mean, I think you always have to look for the positives, and I think that connectivity. I mean, Southampton is a very connected city. It's a city that is very diverse, and lots of different nationalities and lots of different businesses, from SMEs right the way through to conglomerates and large businesses. And of course, we've got the port, and that takes up a large supply chain network. So I think the value chains within the city are amazing in terms of business. And we already had good, strong networks, but I think what the pandemic did was kind of pull all of those different strands together, and people starting to get even more creative than they normally are about how to start to, how to start the recovery. I mean, actually, we were right in the middle of the pandemic, and all of the colleagues that I talked about were busy responding and reacting, and we had our silver and our gold command, and all of that was going on. But actually, the management team and I, and it was a brand new management team. So I've got a team of people who moved into the city as a new team after my first year at the council as a new CEO, having done that kind of review, and they all started in lockdown. So again, as system leaders, trying to actually kind of build those networks and get to know their new roles and get to know their new teams and business networks. But yes, I mean, the director of place that had came in as a very experienced director working with businesses, and we sat down and said, right, we're going to have to get a recovery plan up and running immediately. So that started probably in the April of 2020, only 4 weeks after the emergency began. And I think that, again, back to our sort of training, you do start thinking through recovery. So that was really, really important. And I think part of that recovery was about how do we build on the networks and connections that we've already got with businesses in the city, and how do we start to get creative with businesses about what we need to do to really stand the city in good stead for the future. And we had some plans on the shelf anyway. I mean, things like City of Culture bid was something that we already had on the shelf. Wanting to put in a bid to be UK City of Culture in 2025, you do have to start quite early. So starting to engage businesses in those sort of recovery plans as well, because the whole point about such bids is about the economy and growing the economy and bringing inward investment into cities in order to help grow skills and jobs and deal with some of the challenges that cities have got. And we've seen from historical situations like Hull, you can really generate a tremendous growth in your GVA for an area, your gross value added statistics. So certainly that side of things. The other thing, I guess, that was a key strand was our Freeport bid. And working with businesses on that, because there had been some indications from government that they were looking at introducing free ports pre-COVID pandemic starting. So we were doing work on that, and then also, already thinking about the kind of help and kind of networks that we needed to build for SMEs to help support. Southampton was very lucky. We'd worked very closely with the Chamber of Commerce. And there was a new Southampton-based Chamber of Commerce branch being developed. So again, it's really building on those opportunities that existed just before the pandemic, and immediately in April 2020 starting to think, right, what's the plan then? How do we start to drive a recovery plan that's day-to-day and immediate, but also growth plans for the city, and looking at sites in the city that were ripe for really good development opportunities, and working with existing developers. The Leisure World site is a prime example where I'd had some conversations with the private sector investors in 2019. So you pick up the phone and start saying to people, well, we're still open for business. We're in the middle of a pandemic, but we've got a plan. And I think that's really important to create that optimism and positivity, and show the confidence that you've got in the place and the people of that place, that we can get through this and move on. And of course, Southampton was a big sufferer of the Second World War. So I guess people liken this as we're actually at war with something, and we need a plan for beyond that.
And that sort of resilience really does help. And it does sound like you've been able to pull together on lots of different fronts, really, by having the City of Culture bid, and like you say, the activity that was going on around the free ports. How was that? How did those things help to focus your activity and your positivity?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think you see them as catalysts. So you understand that these are catalysts that can bring a system together, or a system of around sort of infrastructure and businesses, but also around people. And there are challenges in the city. COVID or no COVID, there are challenges, and businesses struggle, probably like many other big cities. But I think Southampton particularly has some statistics that can sometimes suggest, people suggest that it's a northern city on the south coast, in terms of some of the challenges that it has around sort of skills and employability. We have got challenges around NEETs, people that are not in employment, education or training, and it's sort of using free ports and bids like the Freeport bid, the City of Culture bid, to really pick up on some of those statistics that are very challenging in Southampton. It is slightly unique as well. It's a double-edged sword. We've got two fantastic universities in the city. 40,000 students make up some of that population. In COVID times, of course, that's a challenge, because particularly now, for example, in the moment we're living in now, we've got a higher than average younger population in the city, so they're not yet vaccinated. So really sort of pushing and working with businesses and working within the system to get as many people now vaccinated over 18 as possible is absolutely essential. And you kind of see the COVID figures are sort of, they peak, go back down, peak, go back down in the city. And that's as a result of that younger population. But also the other side of that double-edged sword is that you've got 40,000 amazing brains in the city that are training and learning, the enthusiasm, the ability for startups, the ability for high-level apprenticeships that can help the businesses that are in the city. And we've had some fantastic kind of inward investment opportunities like Starling Bank, back in 2019, the first branch outside of London. We've got big companies in the city like PwC. We've got some fantastic companies like Pearce Smith and so on in the city. And then, as I say, ABP, DW World, in terms of DP World, in terms of the port. So, and then amazing retail. So all of these businesses want to have people that they can employ. So how do we work with the education system and the universities? But we've also got some amazing assets, like one of only 7 national oceanography centres in the whole world in Southampton, and the universities again pump prime through research, maritime, focus on maritime, and as well as sort of public sector roles and systems like our fantastic university hospital. All of that system is their employers, and they need to have the skill sets. So it's how do we sort of balance out and drive the optimism through free ports, through City of Culture bid, but also deal with the needs that we've got in the city, and using those students and those fantastic networks from schools right the way through to universities is part of our plan in terms of recovery as well, focusing on young people. One of the other catalysts that's part of our recovery is becoming a UNICEF child-friendly city, and I think again that just starts to break any cycles that we've got in the city that are challenges for young people in becoming future very successful citizens in a city like ours.
How difficult is it at the moment? Because obviously there's a little bit of uncertainty still, isn't there? Or quite a bit of uncertainty, and we're moving towards hopefully that date when a lot of the restrictions will go. But are you very much looking and thinking, well, yes, I know the Prime Minister's been talking about, you know, we've got a difficult winter ahead of us, probably. I mean, is that something that you're very aware of? Because obviously you're
Yes.
sort of wanting to get the recovery happening, but it has to be with those sort of thoughts in your mind as well, I guess, doesn't it?
It does. And I mean, again, I guess very early on, it's having all the, it's like a, you know, it's a spider's web, isn't it? And sort of creating all the different strands. So one of the early strands was working with the University of Southampton on some fantastic sort of breakthrough research that colleagues over there were doing around saliva testing. And we put a bid into government to suggest that this rather innovative way of testing for COVID would be a quick solution, quicker than the tests that had been developed. And I think there was recognition very early on in the city amongst our public health colleagues and university colleagues, clever people, that actually, you know, we now had a world with COVID. And that's something that perhaps people nationally might not have twigged quite yet. You know, that was twigged very early on in the city, and thus the investment in the potential for a test that would be innovative, quicker, more accessible for people. And we piloted that with young people in schools and vulnerable people, and it's proven to be very successful. And that project is still in development now. And government are backing it. I think there's about 15 million being invested in that project. So, you know, that's an early example where we were planning for how do we live in a world where this exists, and can we create something for the city which could actually be helpful for businesses and the population, but maybe transferable across the rest of the country, the rest of the world, if we can develop it in the right way. It hasn't moved as quickly, like all sorts of things, as we might want. And of course, now we've got the lateral flow tests, which are relatively quick. So we're using those rather than the saliva testing. But we're still driving that innovation, because that may still be a solution longer term in a world where we've got to manage the infections, and the vaccines won't do that completely on their own. So, you know, that's the narrative coming out from government about testing every day, if you're going into the office and working. And I think it's about how do we create a city that can still be moving and living and breathing, and an ecosystem that is successful economically and socially, but at the same time keep everybody protected. So we're absolutely planning for that through the winter. We don't want to see more lockdowns. I mean, that's just not healthy for the economy. It's not healthy for people either. I know there are people like Ruby Wax, who was very connected, and is, I think, very connected still with the University of Southampton, a great advocate of mental well-being, and she's talked about the kind of mental health pandemic that could follow next if we don't do something about that. And I feel very cognizant of that as the chief executive of the local authority. You know, my job is to think about that system wide risk, and how do we help work with businesses in the city and our business improvement district, Go Southampton, who represent a lot of the retail trade as well. How do we keep our high street alive? And people are social animals, and as I said, the city is a very connected city. So I pre-pandemic, I didn't spend any time in an office. I didn't have an office of my own. A lot of my time was in the coffee shops across the city, and I would have my meetings walking about and in the coffee shops. And I want to get back to that, and I want to get back to that safely, as someone whose job is about connectivity and relationships. So I think having systems in place, working with our public health team in our organisation, working with the NHS as well, and working with retailers and businesses to make it as safe as possible. I think also as an employer, we're looking at how do we create the hybrid working environment that people now enjoy. I mean, we've done research into our own organisation, I know others have, and employees do want a mix. They want the ability to socialise. They'd like the water cooler conversations, the kitchen conversations and the social aspects and the networking and the creativity that comes out of face to face, but they also want that quiet time, that productivity time that they've gained by not commuting every single day. And so there's this sort of mix that I'm very cognizant of, and the ability to create that smarter working environment for individuals. And that includes actually investment in the city. I mean, companies like Tube have come in, invested about 50 million, again, pre-COVID, become a big sponsor of our UK City of Culture bid, because they see the opportunities that there are around technology and the kind of digital economy. And that there's a place for that alongside the coffee shop cafe economy as well, which people enjoy as part and parcel of day-to-day working these days.
And it sounds, Sandy, I mean, you sound very positive about looking to the future. What do you feel sort of immediately for this year will be the positives, and looking ahead? What are you looking forward to most for the city?
I think I'm absolutely looking forward to winning the bid to be UK City of Culture in 2025, and then using that as that catalyst to open up the city to investment, to help the vulnerable people that live in the city to have the opportunities that I think they deserve. And I think that will come and that will flow from a catalyst like this. I think, again, Freeport, how we take that forward, and how we take that forward in a broader way with the kind of surrounding are with our local enterprise partnership and our other partners like the New Forest. There's some fantastic developments as well that are just on our shores. And I think those two catalysts will also open up some of the work we're doing in terms of shaping the place. The Southampton was in the middle of a process that we have to undertake by statute, which is review our place shaping and provide a local plan and all the policies that sit behind that local plan. Well, I think COVID on the plus side creates a kind of, again, a catalyst that forces you to think in a different way about things, that makes you think about, well, what does the future of place look like? If our children are growing up in the city and going to be the future leaders of businesses in the city, what kind of place will they need to help function properly for society and the economy? So we're looking at a 2050 plan, and that links with government plans like the Maritime Plan for 2050. So that place shaping is another catalyst, which was happening anyway. And I think working with businesses and householders and tenants across the city to kind of shape that over the coming year or two will be absolutely vital. And then, of course, the city has that diversity that I talked about, some amazing events. So one of the things I'm looking forward to is being able to create a safe enough environment that some of the events that normally happen in the city can continue to happen and grow. And some of those are about our sort of cultural diversity, communities like our Sikh community, our Hindu community, our Muslim community, our Polish community, all have events that they celebrate. Our Chinese community, they celebrate a fantastic celebration every year, which the rest of us get to enjoy. And of course, the last 2 years, Chinese New Year has had to be virtual rather than actual. So I think those sort of events, there is an amazing array of pubs and eateries, independent and chains, and museums and art galleries, and like I say, music events, in all the pubs. I want to get all of that open and running again properly. And I think, just really finding a safe way to do that and be able to do that through the winter months. I mean, we've had a bit of a tough summer, haven't we? I mean, we've gone by midsummer, and it was a bit dreary midsummer's day, wasn't it? So how do we make sure we prepare for the winter and create a sense of optimism and ability for people to live their lives, but also balance that with the reality that to do that we've got to change our behaviours. And part of my job will be working with our public health team and our NHS and universities and businesses to make sure we think about, well, what does that look like in terms of a safe environment? And if you look around at the moment, already the creativity that there's been for people to live outdoors and operate outdoors in a kind of warm enough environment and a dry enough environment. So there'll be a bit more of working with people on that, I think, over the next few months to prepare for the winter, because I do want us to be able to provide people with the ability and the facilities to keep kind of living their lives and putting money into the economy as well, but doing it in a safe way.
Thank you so much, Sandy. Sounds like we're in safe hands, and loving your plans for the future there, and look forward to seeing you in the coffee house soon.
Yes, absolutely.